As an athletic trainer, Michael Lopriore's athletic career has spanned some 4 decades and has seen him in the company of some of the biggest names and most prestigious programs in professional and college sports. Mike was a 1969 graduate of Jamestown High School, earned his bachelor's degree in phys ed and sports medicine from Eastern Kentucky University in '76, and his master's degree from Louisiana Lafayette in 1979. He served as an athletic trainer in the early years at Jamestown Community College, and then went on and served as athletic trainer for Louisiana Lafayette University, the University of New Orleans, and was a staff trainer at the Kenner Regional Medical Center in Louisiana. As a certified athletic trainer, he worked for teams such as the LA Dodgers, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the New York Mets, Cincinnati Reds, and the Detroit Tigers, and worked for managers such as Tommy Lasorda, that must have been fun, Bobby Valentine, Buck Showalter, and Willie Randolph. That is really some career. I am pleased to accept Michael Lopriore as an inductee into the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, class of 2019.
No step stool. But anyway, let me start off by saying this is a great honor. I hardly ever come back to Jamestown, New York. It's a little too cold for me now, but when we were young, we had a great time here. It's I couldn't ask for a better place to grow up, and the people that I met here, wonderful. But I'd like to tell you all about a few people in my life who kept me going, kept pushing me, and helping me out. First, my mother and father, who owned Mike and Sam's restaurant. He was pizza fans. By the way, I'm coming back to town, starting a new restaurant, new pizza place. And all you people who own pizza restaurants will have to shut down real soon. But anyway, my mother and father, they always told me, be proud of what you are. Be proud of where you came from. And don't let anybody ever stop you from doing what you want. Okay? When you play games, I don't care what you do in life, you need to go out there. In baseball, we used to say, if we're going to play them, we're going to win them. If you're not going to win them, then we'll just call them in and take the L, and we'll go drink beer and come back tomorrow. Okay? That's the way life is. You have to chug along. You have to keep going. All right? You have to give 110%. Professional athletes are unbelievable. People have no idea how good these guys are. Okay? You hit 300 in the big leagues long enough, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Okay? 300. That means you're getting a hit 3 out of 10 times. There's not a job in the world, if you went 3 out of 10 times, that you would continue to have your job. It's the hardest sport in the world. Everybody hits the fastball. Nobody can hit the breaking ball. Okay? So you have to keep chugging along. So I want to thank my mother and father for this. Always pushed me. I'd like to mention a few other people. I'm not going to be here for very long. Danny Lanetta of the Detroit Tigers. Danny helped me out when I needed some help. Gary LaRocque of the St. Louis Cardinals, minor league director. Gary was the AA manager for the San Antonio Dodgers when I was in AA with the Dodgers as his athletic trainer. And as I would always tell Gary LaRocque, who went on, like I said, to be the minor league director for the Cardinals, I'm with you, Gary, win or tie. You lose, you're on your own, okay? So, Ken Murray, who let me into sports medicine at Eastern Kentucky. 8 guys were accepted into that program. The sixth or eighth school in the country with a curriculum in sports medicine. 8 guys, no girls. There were no girls sports. Okay? 8 of us. We were all on partial scholarships. I'd like to thank Ken Murray. John Porsche, who hired me as the first full-time assistant trainer at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, where I had gone to graduate school. The greatest nickname in the world, the Raging Cajuns. There's no other better name than that one, anywhere. I don't care what you say, okay? And I'd like to thank the main man in my life. His name was Mel Didier. Mel knew Mr. Dietrich. Mel probably could have been the head football coach of LSU. Mel played minor league baseball. Mel just passed away about a year and a half ago at 93 years old. If they ever let anybody in the Hall of Fame that's a scout, Mel will be one of the first. Mel met Mr. Dietrich when he was with the Montreal Expos. He was a minor league director. And he would bring up Mr. Dietrich's name every once in a while. Mel showed me how to be fair but tough to the players. He was the AD, head baseball coach at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and he brought me to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Mel would come in the training room, check me out, see how I handled the players. Little did I know he was checking me out. And he'd see me evaluate shoulders and knees and whatever. And then when Mel went to the Dodgers, he came to me and says, "You're going to the Dodgers too." So I ended up going to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Mel Didier was the guy who told Gibson, accuracy loves to throw what he calls a backdoor slider on a 3-2 count to the left-hander. All right? Gibson was waiting for that pitch. He was sitting on it, as we say in baseball. And he jacked that ball out, and the whole thing turned around. And today I have this World Series ring for that new move. Okay? So, I've worked with many, many people. Koufax, Drysdale, Johnny Padres, Mike Piazza, Roberto Alomar, Sandy Alomar, Matt, Gary Carter, good friend of mine. All right? Basketball, I was a head basketball trainer at the University of Louisiana Lafayette and Kansas State. Worked under two great coaches by the name of Tim Floyd and Frank Martin, who I told one time he was a Cuban. "Frank, you're not fooling me. Your name's not Frank Martin. Your name's Francisco Martin." So, I'd like to thank those guys for my career. Just a quick story. I probably could get you about an hour and 5 minutes if you want to hear all the stories, but he's going to throw me off the stage here. But anyway, Johnny Padres, who was the only World Series MVP of the Brooklyn Dodgers, he took a liking to me. He was like an instructor, pitching instructor for the Dodgers when I was a AA trainer for the Dodgers. And he lived in Glen Falls, New York. That's where his home was. My wife was from Plattsburgh, New York. And he would say, "Anytime you go to Plattsburgh, you need to come see me." So I would. We would bring my son, who was at that time 1 year old, 2 years old. So one day we go to OTB. And Johnny loved the horses, okay? Johnny tells me, when we go to OTB, "Don't you say a word." And it was added a few other words to that. And I says, "Okay, Johnny, I'm not going to say anything to you guys." So we go into OTB, I stand next to the door, and Johnny goes over to all these people, and he's whispering, and he's pointing at me. About 5 minutes later, people were asking me what horse I like and what race. Well, Johnny had told everybody that I was an ex-jockey. So I knew nothing about horses, but that's a true story. When I was at the University of New Orleans, I just give you one more, and this is a great honor, as I said. I really love being here back home. You know, a 5-foot-nothing guy from Allen Street, and I'm standing up here. You got to be kidding, you know? You know, talking about short Italians. But I was at the University of New Orleans. We had a pretty damn good team. We had lost the first 2 games to Oklahoma State on their floors. And we played good against these guys. Well, we were off 17 games in a row. We're ranked 17th in the country. I kept telling everybody I was the 17th best trainer in the country, okay? So, guy from the Time-Picayunes, New Orleans Time-Picayunes, comes and tells me, what have you guys done different to get this thing going? I says, let me tell you what, Tim Floyd, we go out and have a Michelob Dry every night before the game, on the road or at home. And the guy says, you gotta be kidding. I says, oh, why would I lie to you? The next day, I go to my training room, there's a case of Michelob Dry in front of my office and in front of his office. I went to Tim and says, you gotta be kidding me. I should have told that guy we were drinking shots. But I want to thank everybody for voting me in. It's great to be here. God bless you all. And I hope to come back someday. Thank you very much.
All right, Michael, you're now on, you're looking good, I mean, fantastic. So really, what I'd be interested to know is the history of Mike and Sam's as a restaurant. Talk a little bit about your mom and dad, first of all. Did they come over from Italy? Were they?
No, my mother was born in Jamestown. My grandfather came here from Sicily. And he came by himself, and then months later he brought my grandmother and my Aunt Rose, who was one of the partners at Mike and Sam's. Mm-hmm. You know, there was 4 of them: my mother, my father, my Uncle Curly, whose real name was Sam, and my Aunt Rose. Yeah. And my Aunt Rose and my mother were brothers and 2 sisters. Yeah. 2 sisters. So that's how it all started. And my grandfather owned that building, and it was a restaurant, if the story that I get was correct. And then somehow my mother and my Aunt Rose, my grandfather must have asked my mother and my Aunt Rose if they wanted the restaurant, and of course they did, and it went from there. So that was right after the war. My father, after the war, he went back to New York, and then he came to Jamestown, and in between, as you know, my father worked for your father, Shining Steel or whatever they were doing down there. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that was in between the restaurant that the people who were running that restaurant at that time, their lease was about ready to end, but my father still needed to make a few dollars to live. So my father went and worked for your father. That's right.
I remember that. I'm glad you brought that up. Now, your dad's family, did your dad come over from Italy?
My dad's family is quite the history. My grandfather, his father, and my grandmother came to this country. They came separately. They didn't know each other. They got married in Westfield, New York. And rumors are, and I don't know if this is a true story, that they had the first legal license for a marriage in Chautauqua County in Westfield. I think their license was number 1. That's what I've been told. Back in them days, I guess they didn't register everything or whatever. So that may be a true story, it may not be. But they had 3 kids in Jamestown before they decided to go back to Italy, and where my grandfather was somehow drafted into the Italian army during the First World War and never came back from action. He was missing in action. Right. So by then, she had already had 2 kids and was pregnant with my father. My father's name was supposed to be George, and it ended up being Michael because she decided after her husband was declared missing in action that she was going to name him Michael. So I was never Michael Jr. I'm actually the 3rd Michael in line. Yeah. So even my son, who's named Michael, was not named after me. He's named after my father, which is an old Italian tradition. You name the first son after the father's father. The second son is named after the mother's father, and same with the girls.
So the actual building itself was owned by, this would be Rose's?
No, my grandfather, my mother's and Rose's father. His name was Phil Crisilla.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that was his building.
And so Ross Crisilla, he's part of that family too?
Yeah, that's my Uncle Ross. That's my mother's brother, the umpire.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's all coming together.
yeah.
So Mike and Sam's, as I knew that and as you knew that, came to be when? About 1950?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. You know, they were, you know, I always remember it being there. So about 50, 49, 50, whenever they came back from New York City. My father was a 101st Airborne paratrooper.
Ah.
So, Screaming Eagle. And I remember the jackets. He had Screaming Eagle on the side. He had the Eisenhower jacket. He had that weird looking hat that they used to wear.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he tell you any war stories?
No, he would never talk about the war.
Yeah.
No. So.
And you lived there?
We lived right next. No. We lived next door.
That's right, of course.
We lived next door in the house.
Yep.
My grandfather owned the building where the restaurant was and the house. So we lived.
Next door, of course. And you had apartments upstairs, though, didn't you?
There was two apartments upstairs. Yeah. And my cousin, my Uncle Jim, my father's brother, lived up there for years. That was Dominic Lopriore's father, and Anthony Lopriore, and Michael Lopriore. That was the three boys, and then we had Lorenza, my cousin Maria Lopriore, and Rosa Lopriore. And Rosa lives in Italy now, but everybody else is, if they're still alive, they're in Jamestown now.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a little history right there.
A lot of history. How did they get into the pizza part?
My father had the idea of opening a pizza restaurant because there was no pizza in Western New York. He was a New York City guy, and he says, that's a good idea. Let's open up the restaurant. I think originally he wanted to open up a really fancy restaurant, but it ended up being a more of a college bar, as you know, for 30-some years. It was the hottest college bar in Jamestown, and where, how kids are now today. It's a bar's hot for 2 years and then they go to another place. That place was hot for 30 years.
And
So.
of course, the go-to meal was pizza.
Yeah, you got the pizza, man.
There was, I growing up, I can't even remember there was an alternative.
No. And
I may be biased.
I might come back and open up another one and drive all the other pizza places out of town.
Do you still have the recipe?
Absolutely. You kidding me?
Well, I just remember so much. And how was the restaurant run? I got the sense that your mother was sort of behind in the restaurant.
My mother,
kitchen.
right? My mother and my aunt were in the kitchen, and my Uncle Curly and my father were up front.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it was run. And then they would pretty much, we would when it would get really busy, he would hire one of my cousins to be a waiter or a waitress, and some of my cousins, Dominic as an example, Lopriore, he would bartend back there every once in a while. So, but the girls were always in the back, and the boys were up front.
I remember your dad is such a front guy. He of course had the accent. He still had the.
Well, yeah, he had a good personality. Probably a lot better than mine.
It was so noticeable. So, Mike, you obviously, we connected through Jefferson Junior High School.
That's right. Well, no, actually.
Did you go to Bush?
No. I went to Rogers.
Okay.
Well, we actually first met playing midget football.
Midget football, of course.
That's how we met. We were on the Southside Blue Devils.
That's Southside
And we joined the Southside Blue Devils, you and me, after they had won 10 titles in a row, and we were the first team to lose. But we came back the next year, our second year together, and we took the city championship again. So.
And I remember the great picture of you, and you had Mike and Sam's.
That's right.
As a
They would come around and advertising, and my father, of course, I was on the team, and I wore the shirt that said Mike and Sam's, and you guys all had, I don't know if you had a name on yours.
I just had a number.
But you guys had a number, and of course my number back in them days, they didn't care what number 15 as a lineman. So,
Mike and Sam. That's right. And then off we went to Jefferson together.
That's right. We went and played football together there.
That's right.
Yeah, and then we went to high school.
My God. And what I remember about Southside Blue Devils is our coach, Joe Albano.
That's right. And Johnny played with us too, his son.
Yeah. Joe was a liquor salesman.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And
Was it Mr. Benson? Or-
yeah, Mr. Benson and
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson.
They all had sons on the team.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
And they'd all played high school football together. Abramson, Mr. Abramson.
Right. Those guys had played football together. But I think you and I may have been the only guys that moved on to continue to play
I
football.
think that's right.
Yeah. I don't think any of those other guys ever played.
They played baseball or
They were all baseball players. The hardest sport in the world.
yeah, it is. You can't hit a curveball.
You can't hit. You got to. It's the only job in the world where you can fail 7 out of 10 times and go to the Hall of Fame if you last long enough.
That's right.
So it's pretty good. It's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, we continued our football and until they threw curveballs at me, anyways, and
Yeah.
I gave it up and
That's right.
played softball.
Yeah.
So we graduated together in 19. Well, let's go back to stories. I love stories. Do you have a recollection of a kind of a humorous story during that football time period? It may be at Jeff, it may be at JHS,
That'd
it
be
may
hard.
be on go to Union City, you know, all these little things.
Not really. Some of the stuff we probably shouldn't have done. We had good times, didn't we? We had a lot of laughs. As I tell everybody in my family, I says, we had a class of 600, and I think I might have been 599, but that's okay. I regrouped later on.
Indeed, you did.
Yeah.
So many stories, but one that comes to mind is Tom Keppick. Tom, as you recall, was on our team at Southside.
With the Hosanna?
Yeah, Tom, he weighed in up at Allen Park. I remember this because you could only weigh in the day before the first game.
That's right,
As
yeah.
long as you were 125 or less, you were good.
You were good.
So I don't know what they did, but Tom probably was 150.
That's right.
And they just squeezed him in, down, and got to 125. And then, of course, the rest of the year, he's a giant among
Oh, he was good. And Tom ended up being am I recalling right, a dentist.
Oh, big time.
Did that, and he moved to California. And this is a weird story. The guy who took over for Al Campanis when that whole thing blew up with the Dodgers years and years ago. God, I can't remember his name. He became the GM for a few years after that when we won the World Series in '88. Tom was his dentist in California, in LA. So, and one time, I remember when he used to kick off, and he would holler Hosanna, and we'd kick off, and everybody would holler Hosanna as we were running down the field. Yeah. Remember that? Hosanna.
Yeah, Tom was, he was huge.
Yeah.
At that age. And so we graduated in 1969, and our paths continued to keep going, but I kind of lost track. Give us a little academic
Oh, okay. Yeah.
from class of 69.
Well, you went to Allegheny, of course. You and Charlie Mastretta to play football and get a great education. I went to JCC for 2 years. And met Nick Criolla and Bruce Turner and the rest of those guys down there. And then from there, I went to Cortland State, didn't like it, came back, worked construction for 2 years. I remember telling my father I wasn't going to go back to college because I was getting paid working in the union probably $6 an hour. I think minimum might have been $2.
Yeah.
So I thought I was rich, bought myself a brand new Firebird. And then as I got into my second year, I got a job, and I woke up the next morning, and I says, I can't do this when I'm 40. I got to go back to college. So that's how I went. I went to Eastern Kentucky, and Jim Mathis actually. I had told Jim I want to go back to college, but I want to get into some sports medicine. And he says, well, Eastern Kentucky is going to start a curriculum in sports medicine. And he knew a few people there, so he called them, and I went down there and we talked. And I got into the curriculum there, the first class. There was only 8 guys. There was no girls because there was no girls sports. So they didn't really need girl athletic trainers at that time. We were the first class. And we all graduated. I went to graduate school, University of Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, the greatest name of all sports. And there's not a name like the Raging Cajuns. Maybe the Thunder and Herd, but I can't compete to the Raging Cajuns.
Not at all.
And got my master's there in education and became the grad assistant there. I was the first ever grad assistant at the University of Louisiana. And at that time it was called University of Southwestern Louisiana. And I stayed there and finished in 2 years and worked under some really good athletic trainers. And then actually came back to Jamestown for 2 years, JCC. And let me retract that because I really met Nick and Bruce when I came back. Or they, you know what, I can't remember if they were at JCC when I was going to JCC. I think they may have been. But anyway, when I came back, I got a part-time job at JCC as an instructor, and I did some athletic training for them. And from there, I went back to the University of Louisiana Lafayette as the first full-time athletic trainer assistant.
Now have you gotten a license that you've been?
Oh, you have to become you have to go through the curriculum. Now you have to go through the curriculum. Schools didn't have that. We were the 6th or 8th school in the country to have a curriculum. And you have to go through the curriculum. You have to take your anatomy, your physiology, all your sporting stuff. Your back in then days, you had to take chemistry, which I don't understand why, but we took chemistry. And then you had to take a national test to become NATA certified, and that was the only way you're going to become an athletic trainer. You weren't an old rub-down guy. You know, you had to know your anatomy. You had to know how to rehab. You had to know about the human body and how to evaluate, because doctors diagnose and trainers evaluate. So that's the way it is, and that's the way it should be. So anyway, I went from there as a first-time assistant athletic trainer at the University of Louisiana Lafayette, and then a guy by the name of Mel Didier, who was he was a head baseball coach, athletic director there.
No kidding.
Mel later on during our connection years later, he had told me, I had known he was the minor league director for the Montreal Expos, and he had said, oh yeah, I used to go to Jamestown all the time. But years later, he told me he knew Mr. Dietrich because he would deal a lot with Mr. Dietrich, and we would talk about that every once in a while. So Mel took a liking to me. He used to watch me work closely and see me how I handled the players and all this stuff, and he decided that he was going to go join the Dodgers with Tommy Lasorda, and he says, he's moving, and he says, can you stay at my house and watch my house for a while? And I said, sure. And he says, and by the way, as soon as I get the opportunity, you're going to be an athletic trainer for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So my ambition always was to be the head trainer at the University of Notre Dame, because my father loved Notre Dame, and that was my ambition, to be the head trainer at Notre Dame. But then I took a right-hand turn, I guess. So anyway, Mel brought me into major league into baseball, and I started out in Bakersfield, California, and moved my way up in the San Antonio Double-A team, and met a guy by the name of Gary LaRocque, who's now the minor league director for the St. Louis Cardinals, and we went from there. So that's.
So now that you're in the Dodgers and you go to spring training,
right?
And is this when your paths crossed with Lasorda and?
Oh yeah, Lasorda took a liking to me because my name ended with a vowel. So, and Tommy would get Italian food delivered for lunch, and he'd always call me in and would have some lasagna or whatever he had delivered, Italian sausage with some green peppers, So, Lasorda, one time I went into his office one time, and I says, hey, Tommy, and this is how money was, it's crazy now, but then it was even a little crazy. I asked Tommy if he had change for a 20, and his answer back to me was, I thought 20 was change. So So I kind of walked away and went and got changed for a 20 someplace else.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Lasorda, Koufax, Johnny Padres, all those guys were instructors then, of course. They weren't playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I knew a lot of those guys. Wayne Kirby, man, tons. I can't remember. Joe Zeckley was this guy who was a catcher, left-handed catcher. I mean, he was, a right-handed catcher, but he swung the bat from the left side. He was just fun, and he was married to. He went to Texas A&M, and he was married to this cute little girl, and they ended up getting divorced. And I think I was probably one of the first ones he told me he was going to get divorced, but. His theme song in the minor leagues, as you know, everybody has a theme song when they come up to the plate.
Yeah.
And Joe Zeckley's theme song was "All my exes live in Texas, that's why I live in Tennessee," and that was his theme song because he had just gotten divorced. So you know, we had a lot of laughs. It was a good time. I didn't make a lot of money, but I sure had a lot of fun. You know. So anyway,
I remember you sending me. In fact, I gave it to the Sports Hall of Fame. There's a couple of pictures about this size of you and Lasorda, and I think with your mom and dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
mom and dad, and
they used to come down for spring training.
Petey, you know, you'll appreciate this, and I did. My gosh.
Yeah,
You're playing with the big dogs.
Yeah, we knew them all. Yeah, it was fun.
So how long were you in the Dodger organization?
5 or 6 years. Then I had my, you know, I was married and had my first son, Mike, and I would. You know, because the baseball was always on the road, he really didn't know me. So I decided, you know what, maybe I need to get back into the college scene, you know, and I'll be around him a little more. And that's when I got the job at the University of New Orleans, and Tim Floyd hired me. Tim Floyd, who ended up being a very, very, very good college basketball coach. And I stayed with Tim for about 5 years, and then I went to the clinic in New Orleans, big clinic, and that's where I really learned how to rehab even better and really got it down to where I wanted. And then when the Diamondbacks started, Mel Didier calls me again and says, I am now the minor league director for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and by the way, you're the new rehab director. So that's how I ended up with the Diamondbacks.
I'll be darned. So what was it? You're a Chautauqua County guy, from Chautauqua County. Next thing you know, you find yourself in Cajun country, Kenner, Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Right.
What was the acclimation like for you?
It was easy. It was easy. You know me, I get along with anybody. You know, for me to call you, think that you're not a good guy, you really got to be not a good guy. Okay, so yeah, I loved it down there in Louisiana. I mean, I just
jambalaya and all.
The food was outstanding. The people were great. The Cajun people, once they take a liking to you, you're locked in forever. You know, they're good people and they're hard workers. You know, I loved that place. I mean, if Mel Didier probably would have not taken me to the Dodgers, I probably would have stayed there, and with my ambition still trying to be Notre Dame. But there was no reason for me to ever live there. It was a great situation. I mean, it's a great town. It's got culture. It's got real Cajun culture. There would have been, I probably would have never left. I probably would have stayed right there.
Right.
You know? So, and at the same time, Mel Didier didn't make like a snap decision that he was going back to the Dodgers. I mean, he really thought about this. And if he would have stayed, I would have stayed. You know? Well, you know, I never even thought about getting into Major League Baseball, and that's the honest to God truth, you know, so.
So Didier gets you to the Diamondbacks.
That's right.
And anybody of note on that team at that time?
Sure, Mike Piazza. Excuse me, with the Diamondbacks. I'm thinking of Mets now. Oh yeah, that's when we had the World Series. Well, Gonzalez, Durazo, Randy Johnson was there.
Schilling, was he part of that?
Schilling came, yeah. Schilling was there. Those guys that won the World Series. But that would have been my second World Series ring. But of course, I didn't get that one because Buck got fired the year before, and we all went with him. Ah. So anyway, that's what happened there. So I rehabbed a lot of those guys.
Then you go back into academia. And you'd be part of that from the Diamondbacks. You went back into academia?
From the Diamondbacks, let me see, man. Diamondbacks. Where did I go from? Oh, yes. No. I go to the Mets. That's when I was looking for a job, and the Mets had a job open. Gary would go back to Gary LaRocque with the Dodgers. And Gary LaRocque, I call him. He says he worked it out. So I went to the Mets. And then I became their rehab director a few years later.
This is when your paths crossed with Gary Carter?
Gary Carter, good friend of mine. Gary Carter, I talked to him probably a week or two before he passed away, you know? So, yeah, good friend of mine. I loved him. He's a good guy, you know? So, Gary Carter, you know, Mike Piazza. You know, Mike and I would talk because Mike is a big military buff. Big patent guy, you know, and I think when I told him that what my father had done, that helped us connect. But he's a good guy. Really good guy. So, you know, I met all those guys with the Mets. And then I became the rehab director later on. Well, one year when I was in the minor leagues, I got called up for the 40-man roster and spent a month and a half with the big league team at the end of the year.
Really?
Yeah, went to New York.
With the Mets?
With the Mets, with a big team, yeah. And we traveled and all that stuff.
What fun is that?
That was great. That was great times. It was when you expand to the 40-man roster, they always bring another athletic trainer up. And Gary had a lot to do with that, you know. He got me called up. So the head trainer, assistant trainer, and me in the big leagues, you know.
How'd you find your way to the Tigers?
Danny Lanetta helped me with that one. I was looking around, and Danny
This was after the Mets?
Oh, yeah, it's way after, yeah. And Danny Lanetta, him and I, you know, we were from Jamestown, and we knew each other well, and gave him a call, and before you know it, I was going there, and then I didn't stay there very long because then Kansas State kept calling. And I became the head basketball trainer at Kansas State with Frank Martin. So I left Danny, felt a little bad about it, but this opportunity was, you know, I wanted to go try to get back into college, so.
During your athletic training, you've been baseball.
Baseball and basketball were my two big sports.
But the physiology, I mean, a person's a person, but do you have to think differently how they put stress on their bodies?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In baseball, you're going to get shoulders, you're going to get elbows. In basketball and football, you're going to get knees, you're going to get ankles. You know, baseball, and most of your injuries are shoulder injuries.
Yeah.
You know, you can get rotator cuff, you can ligaments in the elbow. You know, it's a little different sport. I mean, you're doing something in baseball that God does not want you to do. You're not supposed to throw a baseball from here. That's why a softball pitcher can pitch every day.
Yeah.
This is a natural movement. This is not. So it's a different, you know, even in weight training. You know, strength coaches, they have to realize if they come from football to baseball, they have to change their whole way of thinking. They can't do power lifts. They can't do certain things that you would do in football that you would do in baseball. So, and you know, and I always enjoyed. I always had, I could never make up my mind what sport I liked better, basketball or baseball. You know, basketball probably was a little easier because you only had to take care of 12 guys. You know, one guy gets hurt, you got to get that guy back pretty quick. In professional sports, if that guy really has a bad injury, they just move a guy up.
Yeah.
You know, and then you send him to the rehab center, wherever that team has their rehab center. So, you know.
You got selected to a few NCAA regionals.
Right, I've been to NCAA regionals. My first one was with the University of Louisiana Lafayette that's back when they only invited 48 teams. That's how good we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I had a guy by the name of, I don't know if he played on that team, but I had Andrew Toney, who played in the NBA for 12, 13 years and played in the 70s. He was the number one draft choice of the Sixers. He played with Barkley when they won the NBA championship. That guy was a flat out stud. You know, I mean, back in them days, he didn't have the three-point shot. And I was with him a couple times when he scored over 40 points in a game.
My gosh.
And he used to shoot from the old 5-second line. You know, are you kidding me? You know, But he was Mr. Alabama, and he came to the University of Louisiana Lafayette. You know, so he's a great guy. Most guys, athletes, are fantastic. Fantastic. 99% of them.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, they need you as much as you need them. In
Yeah,
reality,
the problem is, let me tell you what, you know how I got my 2 best jobs? With one line. I told both those guys, I'll win you a game or 2, and I'll get you to the NCAAs as a trainer, because I'll get that player back faster than somebody else will. And I don't care how good you are as a coach. If you don't have the guys on the floor or on the field, your studs, you're not going to win. You can try to outcoach them, but most likely, if you don't have your big boys on the floor or on the field, you're not going to win. And that's the problem with sports, especially in high school. They don't have they have to get trainers that know it, you know, that are good in rehab. They have to get, and a coach who wins 300 games, for me, if I was his trainer, by the time he won 300, he would have won 325 if I was his trainer by that time. Okay? Athletic trainer, well, and then what they're doing now, back in my days they didn't do this, now they're doing it. If the trainer is good enough, he goes with the coach. Okay? And that's what got us all with the Diamondbacks. We were all Bucks guys. So that's why we all got it. Okay?
even at that level. I mean, you just.
I was rehab director. Buck hired me.
Yeah.
You know? Buck one time told me, he says, I see that you're giving everybody Sundays off, Mike. I said, sure, Buck. Why wouldn't I? And he says, well, they should be doing something on Sundays. I says, well, Buck, there's a famous doctor by the name of Job that says you should have a day off once a week. And then Buck says, well, okay, I agree with that one.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that discussion. So, anyway, and a guy could come in on Sunday. If you wanted to run or do something, I had no problem with that.
Yeah.
Because once baseball season starts, I work 24/7. Okay? I work every day. People would say, what you doing on the 4th of July? I'm going to the park. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm going to go watch the game. Well, good. I'll be working that day.
Did your paths cross with Job's?
Oh, yeah. When I was with the Dodgers, sure. You know, Jobs was actually a scream. If I recall right, Dr. Jobs was a screaming eagle, too. And that's how we connected. He was during the Second World War. He was a screaming eagle.
No kidding.
Yeah. But my father, well, they didn't know each other, of course, but that was one of the connections with him. He actually told me with Tommy John surgery that they made a mistake. When they first did Tommy John, they locked his arm in. And when they took him out of the cast, he was locked in. They had to gradually work his way back. And then later on in the years, they came up with this thing called the turnstile brace, which after a certain amount of time, you click and it starts going down. So you get extension. In rehabbing, extension, range of motion is the most important thing. Strength will always come.
Yeah.
But you got to get range of motion.
So we got you to the Tigers, and then you went to Kansas for basketball. Now where?
And then I went to a little community college. Kansas. It was pretty cold in Kansas. So I ended up at a little college in Arizona. And from there, I I ended it all with the Cincinnati Reds. That's where I went, Cincinnati Reds. So.
Who was there? Was it with Pinella there?
No. With the Cincinnati Reds, the guy who was the head trainer with the Diamondbacks years prior, name's Paulie Lassard, who is now the head trainer for the Washington team. Him and I were good buddies. They had a little opening, and I wanted to get back into baseball at that particular time, and it all worked out. And I stayed 1 year. I turned 62 years old, and I says, boys and girls, I am done. So that was the end of that.
It's got to be hard on you physically. I mean, you're physically doing things with people.
Stress. But stress never. You would go to bed and say, God, I can't get this guy better. What am I supposed to do? But you know what? You just think about it and you come up with something a little different. You tweak a little different on his rehab, and all of a sudden he's coming back. He's doing better again. It all worked out for me. And I'm a push-pull guy when it came to rehab, and I used all the, my theory was if it worked 50 years ago, it's going to work again, okay? So, was I a little, when I was with the Dodgers, I met this guy by the name of Bush. He was the Mr. Bush. I can't remember his first name. His last name was Bush. He was the head track coach for Southern Cal, University of Southern, USC. And he was our running guy with the Dodgers. And one day he came up to me and says, Mike, you know much about hamstrings? And I says, I know a little. He says, I want to teach you everything I know about hamstrings. And he took me by the hand and wrote out this program that he used. And he was he's a famous track coach from Southern Cal. God, I wish I could remember his first name. But anyway, he wrote it out. And I used this rehab program on hamstring pulls for the rest of my career. And it worked 99 out of 100 times.
Wow.
So I could get hamstrings back really quick. And see, you get a lot of hamstrings in baseball. You get a lot of hamstrings in football. The four major sports in America. You have football, baseball, basketball, hockey. The two sports where you have less hamstrings are basketball and hockey. And people would say, why? Because you play the game going backwards. See?
Thought about that.
Yeah. In baseball, you never go backwards. The outfielder might take a couple steps backwards, but then to get the ball, he's got to turn and run.
Yeah.
And you'll get hamstrings all the time in baseball because coming out of the box, track guys coming out of the starting area, you get hamstrings all the time. You know, in football, you get hamstrings. The only guys you get less hamstrings with D-backs because they take that big stride back when that guy's coming at them.
Yeah.
So I got good at hamstrings. His name's Jim Bush, if I recall right. I can't remember his name, but you can look it up if you want to.
Yeah, people on it.
Yeah.
So 62, you decide to hang it up.
62. I would turn. At 62 years old, I retired. I actually retired. My contract went to the 1st of November, so I actually retired at the age of 62 in November of that year.
Yeah.
So that was. I got tired of writing soap notes, you know. So.
Did you keep your degree? I mean, did you keep your certificate?
No, I kept my certificate for about another 3 years because when you're in college and when you're in a professional sports, the team picks up your $400 or $500 dues every year. So I kept it for a couple more years just in case I thought about going back. But nah, I went, and then I sat around for about 2 or 3 months, and then I decided I needed a job. I needed to get out of the house. So I ended up working at a golf course as a starter ranger.
Oh,
I do that.
Terrific.
Yeah, I did that, and I really enjoyed that. And I worked at the Tucson Omni in Tucson, Arizona, where they used to have a really big PGA. Now they have a seniors tournament there. And then stayed there for about a year. And then Oro Valley Country Club in Oro Valley, Arizona, which is like a suburb of Tucson. They had an opening for a guy to go into the locker room. So now I work in the locker room. Sometimes I go out and move a few bags, but it's just
You feel like you want to just...
sometimes I really, a lot of those old guys are, because, it's an expensive private course. They'll come up with a little hamstring, or they'll come back with a little back or this, and they'll come and ask me questions. What should I do for this or that, Mike? And I give them the answer. I try, as I said, I try to evaluate their problems. And I say, well, try this, and if this doesn't work, then you might need to go see an orthopedic, So, I don't do much anymore. So, but I go to the golf course and I relax. I have a good time. Good people. It's a fun time.
Well, you're such a gregarious person. My God, I can see why you're value added wherever you are.
Well, thank you. But I tried.
You did incredibly well. And when Randy Anderson or somebody called you, were you surprised to get the word that?
Well, I was wondering what took you so long. Tell you the truth. So anyway, yeah, I was kind of surprised. Well, the number comes up a 716 number, and I'm thinking, heck, it's Randy President. Maybe he got a different number or something like that. So I pick up, and I can't even remember who called me. It wasn't Randy Anderson. And says, this is so-and-so, and I'd like to ask if you would love to be inducted in the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame. And he even said, I'm sorry it took so long.
There you go.
So I said, well, that's fine. So
Fantastic.
Here I am.
So as you look back, gosh, almost 40 years.
39 years as an athletic trainer.
Right.
Did I get lucky? Yeah, I got lucky, but everybody's got to have a little luck. I mean, I met the right people at the right time. There's probably a lot better athletic trainers out there than me, but right people, right time, right attitude, and knew enough to get it done, I guess. So, I enjoyed it. And like I said earlier, didn't make a lot of money, but I sure met a lot of good people and I had a lot of fun. There's stories, Randy Anderson tells me I got to go up there and give a 5-minute speech. I says, I could give you 55 minutes if you want, but that's the way she rolls. So if I got time, I'll throw one story in.
What's the story you're throwing in case?
I'm probably going to throw in the Johnny Padres story, which is a classic. Johnny Padres was as you know, the first and only MVP of a Brooklyn Dodger World Series. Well, Johnny and I became good friends when I was with the Dodgers. He was a minor league pitching. He was like an instructor. He would go from team to team, He wasn't with a particular team. So Johnny knew that my wife was from Plattsburgh, New York, and he's from Glen Falls, New York. And he would say, next time you go to Plattsburgh, you come down and see me. So Mike was about my oldest one was 1 or 2 years old. We'd go down there. So one day we would spend a night or two with him. And one day he says, Mike, I says, yeah, Johnny, we're going to OTB. I says, okay, Johnny. As you know, off-track betting. Johnny was like the horses. I said, okay, but when we go in there, don't you say a word. Johnny, whatever you want. So we go in and he says, stay right here. He goes and mingles with all these people, and 5 minutes later, I'm getting people coming up to me and asking me what horse I liked in such and such a race. I says, well, I don't know anything about horses. This guy's telling everybody I'm an ex-jockey. Put on a few pounds, but he knows his horses. So that's a true story. Yeah, that's what Johnny was, Johnny was a good guy, good guy.
Well, for Dodger fans, he's the hero.
Yeah, he is.
1955, man.
Yeah. Johnny was good, funny. He was one of the funniest guys I've ever met. One of the funniest,
We came to Jamestown a couple of times. He was working, I think, with the Phillies. He was a scout.
Yeah, he was actually a big league pitching coach for the Phillies, I think, at the end of his career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And smoked a lot.
Oh, like a chimney, yeah. Johnny one time in spring training, he quit drinking or something because I guess he used to like to drink a little. One of the guys who had known him for years and years, Johnny did something and busted his chops, and the guy told him, I liked you better when you were drinking. We just freaking all died. Because he had been sober by then. So anyway, Johnny's a good guy. Koufax, and Koufax and I were really good buddies. So,
what was Sandy like? You just got the impression he was pretty straightforward.
Oh, it's great. If Sandy liked you, at about the age of Sandy was 50 years old, and he used to go to an area what we called the Strings in Vero Beach in Dodgertown. It was an area but about 6 or 7 pitching mounds, and at the end where the catcher would set up, there was strings. We call it the string area. Well, he would go out early in the morning every 2 or 3 days and throw. And now he's 50 years old. And his breaking ball is dropping like it's coming off a table. And he comes to me one day and he says, I'm really thinking about making a comeback. I says, get out of here. You're 50 years old. He says, Mike, my stuff is unbelievable. Well, Dr. Job had told me years prior to that Sandy actually needed Tommy John surgery, but there was no such thing then. Koufax one time told me that ice was overrated, Ice is overrated. He hated ice. But anyway, he tells me, I'm going to go talk to Peter. The O'Malleys owned the Dodgers at that time. So, and a week or whatever days passed, and he comes, I says, what are you thinking? He says, I can't do it. I says, why? He says, I probably could pitch once a week, but in a 4 or 5 man rotation, I can't go every 4 or 5 days. So he decided, at 50 years old, he was thinking about making a comeback.
My God.
I mean, this guy is 6'3", 6'4", long arms. I mean, what I used to say, your pitchers have to have what you have, a swimmer's body. He's got to be lean but strong, okay? And the guy won 25 or 26 games and retired. Who does that?
Yeah.
But he knew. He knew it was time to go.
He was pitching a lot of pain.
I guess he must have been, But what a good guy, Mike Scioscia, the manager, he was always on a diet with the Dodgers, and he would sneak down to the minor league side and have donuts with us. So, Tommy, but Tommy, we would go to church all the time. Every Sunday, Tommy and I would go to church together because he's a devout. I'll tell you a real quick story. As the story goes, I don't know if this is true, but this is the story that was floating around. He's managing the Dodgers, and he's in Cincinnati, and McNamara is the manager of Cincinnati, if I'm getting the right name. I think it was McNamara. And he goes to church, and he sees McNamara 4 or 5 rows up or whatever. And after church, Tommy hides back, and he watches him, and he goes and kneels in front of the Blessed Mother and lights a candle, and leaves. Tommy watches him the whole time. The church is empty. McNamara never sees Tommy. So during the game, I guess McNamara had to go make a pitching change. He didn't, should I pull the guy? Should I hold the guy in? And Tommy's hollering at him. It'll never work. It'll never work. Whatever you're doing, it ain't gonna work. So I guess McNamara walks, as I was told, towards the Dodger dugout and says, "What are you hollering at me for?" He says, "I was in church today. I seen you. I seen you light the candle. Whatever you do ain't gonna work because I blew the candle out." So that's the story. Is it true? I don't know. But I always thought that was a classic story.
Was Kirk Gibson with the Dodgers in an
When we hit the home run. Yeah, absolutely. That's the year I retired. I retired from the Dodgers. I became the head trainer at the University of New Orleans. Okay? Yeah. I left the Dodgers for the University of New Orleans basically because of my son. So Gibson, Mel Didier, and people don't know this about this. Mel Didier should be, if they ever let scouts in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, Mel Didier should be the first one let in. Yeah. That's how, he's the smartest baseball man I have ever met. He knew the game inside out. You go to games now, they all got their jugs guns, they're all freaking, Mel Didier could watch a guy and say, he can play, he can't play. And Mel was big on hustle. You hustled. If you're dogging in AA, you don't think you're going to double dog when you're in the big leagues, okay? But Mel Didier should be in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt. He didn't need no jug. He's the best that ever lived. And he took, he was my mentor after my father passed away. And I would go and have Thanksgiving with him and all that stuff. He lived in Phoenix, we lived in Tucson, and he was just, he was great man. So, anyway.
Did he pass away?
Yeah, he passed away about 1.5 years ago. And luckily, let me tell you a quick story. I went, my youngest son lives in the Phoenix area, so I went to see him, and I knew Mel, he was real sick. And his wife and I called his wife, and I'd like to come up and see Mel today. And she says, well, he's not doing very well, Mike, So I says, well, I still want to come up and see him. So it was it was a weekend. So anyway, I drove the hour or whatever to get where he lived in the Phoenix area. And his house was all glass the back. And she had the bed set up so where he was looking towards, well, it's not a mountain, but it's got it's a hill off a golf course. And we just talked, and all of a sudden, they say your hearing's the last thing to go when you're about ready to pass. They say you can hear it till almost the end. He extended, he must have knew I was there, because he never opened his eyes. He extended his arm out, and she says, look at him, he's grabbing for you. So, I held his hand for a while, and her and I talked, and then I ended up thanking him for everything he did for me, and the next day he passed away. So I guess it was God saying, you better go see him now.
That's a great story.
Yeah. He should be in the Hall. He's best baseball guy that ever lived. He taught me so much. You can't, you can't play. I don't care if you're playing tiddlywinks. You better want to win, and you better give me 110% every day, because life is like that. You know, you have to give it your all. You know, an old saying we used to say in baseball is that if you play them, you got to win them. If you're not going to win today, fellas, I'll just call the team up and we'll take the W. I mean, we'll take the L, excuse me, we'll take the L, and we'll go drink beer, because we're going to get an L anyway. Why should I waste three hours at the ballpark if we're going to lose? So if you're going to play them, you better win them. And that's from Little League all the way to the top. You know, I'm not a firm believer that you give a kid a little trophy for being around. You got to win. Life is about winning. That's my theory, you know. People might think I'm bananas, but we have to win. You have to win. You have to win in your business. You know, I was with some great teams, and I think I helped a lot of great teams win. I might have helped them win 1 or 2 games to get to the NCAA or get to the minor league playoff game or whatever. But I felt like I was trying to do my best. And I guess people seen that I was doing my best, and I got lucky, man. I mean, I'll be the first one. You know, God and luck. You know, that's the way it rolls.
That's right.
So anyway,
this has been great, Mike. You've been fantastic to tell your story, share your story, and not tell any stories about us. That's great.
Yeah, about you and me. Yeah, playing hockey.
Hockey.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably add that to the end of the video. The highlights. When you were the goalie extraordinaire.
Ugh, can't get one by me, man. It was unbelievable.
We didn't. We got by Carmen.
Yeah.
Sam Carmen. He was.
Yeah. You know what, Sam Carmen, John Toga,
Yep.
and Bruce Turner, who was a wrestling coach at JCC, we all live in Tucson now.
No kidding.
Yes, well, Bruce and Sam always come for the winter. John Toga lives in Tucson. We all meet for lunch every 2 weeks at a particular bar or gin joint and have a sandwich and drink a couple beers and talk over old times. But it's good. We met Bruce. I was coming out of a little tiny sandwich. Oh, he was coming out of a little sandwich restaurant in Tucson, outside Tucson, and Bruce Turner recognized me. He says, Mike Lopriore. And he says, I'm Bruce Turner. Bruce Turner. We just ran, we would have never known he was there. So now it's a foursome instead of a threesome.
In all the gin joints in all the world, there you are.
There we are. Yeah. It was unbelievable. He was walking out and I was walking in this place. I would have walked right by him, honest to God. I would have walked right by the guy. And he recognized me quick. So, and I says, Bruce, we need to get together. And he gave me his telephone number. And then, like I said, us three used to go out and we included Bruce. So Bruce comes with us now.
Oh my gosh. Well, be sure you give everybody my best.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I remember Sam's camp. Remember his dad's camp?
Oh, yeah. We had some good parties at that camp, let me tell you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. We had a good time.
Sam did labor work, didn't he?
Sam was in the, I think Sam ended up he ended up in Wisconsin. I think he was a union rep or negotiated contracts between teachers and school boards. John was went to RIT and was an engineer, and then it ended up his father-in-law was a train driver, a train engineer.
Train, yes.
And John was doing, John can build anything. John built his own swimming pool in his backyard. Didn't even have to ask for help. He did it from ground level by himself. I think he did 90% of the work himself. Okay, he's unbelievable. But his father-in-law, he was in kind of the same situation. He was on the road all the time. His wife was there and the kids or whatever. I don't know if he had one or two at that time. And his father-in-law was a railroad engineer, and he told John that they were hiring at the railroad, and John ended up driving trains the last probably 25 years of his life. So we're all retired. We just hang out. I'm the only one that really, I go to work because I want to do something. I just can't. If I'm not working, what I'm thinking about is going to have lunch and drinking about 3 or 4 beers, and I can't do that anymore. So.
Well, it would.
I can't do that every day, put it that way.